Tell me your name and who your father was.
My name's Jarrell Middlebrooks. My father was Tom Middlebrooks. My mother's name's Marie.
And who?
This is Sarah
Sarah.
Tatiana, Savannah Dior, and Zephyr Javier Middlebrooks.
So I'm going to have to walk around this way to get her. She's not going to want to turn around and leave that chicken.
So that's Zephyr.
All right. And what's your name, young man? I know. This is my bride. For a minute. Now tell me your name.
I'm John Coleman Middlebrooks Jr. from originally Cartersville, Georgia, but the family originates from Barnesville, Georgia.
And who do we find your grandfather was? Albert?
Albert Parks
Middlebrooks. And then we found back in the 5th generation that we had a common grandfather, John Sr. Middlebrooks, that moved from Caswell County to Barnesville, or that area.
That's right.
Right. And this is across from you is your wife?
My wife, Hazel.
And what was your maiden name, Hazel?
Brock.
Brock. And you were from Cartersville originally? And y'all live where now?
Wichita Falls, Texas.
And how many kids do y'all have?
2 daughters,
And what are their names?
Bondi and Carmen.
And are they married? And what are their husbands' names?
Christopher Tracy and Greg Rasdell.
And do they still live in Wichita?
One of them lives in Burke Burnett, which is close by, and one lives in Amarillo.
Amarillo. All right, thanks. Hello.
Can you smile?
Yeah, can you tell me your name?
My name is Smith.
Seriously, honey.
Please.
Lee Middlebrooks.
Lee Middlebrooks.
And who was your father?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Charles Eugene.
All right, sir. And this is your bride over here
For quite a while.
for quite a while. And then what was your maiden name?
Foley,
Foley. Okay,
from Missouri.
great. Okay, and Mary, can you say hello to Doyle and Stella?
Yes, I have food in the bathroom.
Okay, sorry.
Hello, Dora and Stella. I think that's all. Come back again.
And tell me who your father was?
My father was Joseph Anderson,
Okay.
the firstborn of Charlie and of Mary Jane and
John Floyd.
John Floyd.
John Floyd. Okay. Now, tell me again, who is the couple that's with you today?
This is Carolyn Duke,
Hey, Carolyn.
and she is the daughter of my sister, granddaughter of my sister, Ruth. And this is her husband, William Robert Duke.
Y'all sure are brave to put up with us today. Thanks. Can you tell me who Verna Mae's dad was? I mean, not Verna Mae's, but Esteline's dad was, and who your name is? John Randolph. Okay. And tell me your last name.
Knox.
Knox. And how many kids do y'all have?
We have 2 children, 4 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren.
My goodness. Now, any of them with you today?
No.
Not any of them with you. Okay. Excuse me. Y'all gonna have to tell me who y'all are and who your grandfather was, or who your father was.
My father's Edley Sartain. My name's Gerald Sartain.
And how y'all?
Mary Middlebrooks
Is your mom?
grandchildren.
Okay. Great. And these are your kids, Mr. Sartain?
Yeah, this is my son-in-law Eddie King.
Hey, Eddie.
Hi. This is my grandson Ian Reynolds. My granddaughter Macy King. My daughter Dana King.
Dana.
My wife over here Sandy King.
Hey, Sandy.
Sartain.
And there's Esteline.
We got 2 little ones running around here.
My goodness.
JD and Katie
They have
King.
twin granddaughters.
They're over there.
That's wonderful.
They're over yonder. One of them is
And Esteline, can you wave at me? All right. Okay, this is all right. This is Tom's wife. Now tell me your name. I mean Gerald's wife. What did I say? I'm getting confused here. Now tell me your name.
My name's Tammy.
Tammy. Okay, we got the picture of the kids a while ago.
They're just still eating.
Can you wave at me? Interview.
Sure.
All right, tell me your name and who your grandfather is.
My name is David Clarence Middlebrooks Sr.
And who's your dad?
My dad is Dwayne Barry Middlebrooks. His father was Clarence Harold Middlebrooks. And
Where do you live, David?
Tyler, Texas.
Tyler, Texas. Oh, good. You came a long ways today, then, didn't you?
Short trip.
Did y'all come in last night?
Came in Friday.
Friday? Okay, and this is your wife? Can you?
I'm Karen Middlebrooks.
Karen? Okay, and how many kids do y'all have, Karen?
We have 3.
3?
David Jr., 7. John Ryan is 3, and Jessica Inez is almost a year old on Tuesday.
Congratulations. Okay, now, Tim,
I'm his brother, Troy Middlebrooks. Same dad and all that. I'm staying in Tyler also.
Still wondering about the same dad stuff.
and
DNA tests have not come in yet.
Are you married? Are you?
No.
Okay.
Very single, no kids.
Having a good time.
Yeah.
There you go. Now tell me your name.
Barbara Frazier.
Barbara Frazier. And Barbara, where do you live?
Houston.
Houston. Oh, well, you did come ways too, didn't you? All right. And you didn't have a hard time finding Jacksboro.
Nope.
All right.
Not too hard.
Okay.
Now I have 2 kids. I have Adam Colby, which is 4.5, and Rachel, 2.5.
Right. And how did you hear about the reunion?
My dad.
Through Lee. Okay. Hello,
Hey,
Lee.
let's eat.
All right.
Forget this stuff.
That's Lee, who's your dad?
Clarence Harold.
Okay.
His dad was Thomas Lee.
All right. And is this your wife here, Lee?
No, I'm Dwayne.
Dwayne.
This is my wife, Carol.
Okay, Carol.
think that's-
There you go.
Hi. Just for 1 second.
And see, all these,
That's right.
all these are y'all's.
All these
Of
are.
course,
Right.
Granddaddy.
Okay. So is this the first time they've come to the reunion?
No, this is the second Troy. I
Troy.
think. David's been several times. Barbara, have you been before? First time.
Barbara was here when she was 2 years old.
Okay.
The last time.
All right.
She's a rookie of the group.
Yeah. Now, Dwayne, are you still in the antique business?
Yep, yeah. And married an antique, and I'm an antique. And we're in the antique business.
All right.
So I'm surrounded.
And he won't.
Now Dwayne, you've got one of the guns, a rifle of one of the grandfathers, don't you?
I've got 2 of them. I'm going to talk about them later, and I even brought them with me.
Okay, good. All right, thanks.
And you were talking about age and getting old. This is my youngest son, but he looks 60. See this receipt?
Lady Jones, the Middlebrooks family there, and we want to lay the wreath on her grave. And today we'd like each and every one of you to put your name on one of these little horses. Jenny was a horsewoman, and that's why I've chosen the horse as her symbol. This is a little good luck symbol. And we wanted to have everybody's name on the ribbon before we put it on her resting place. And I have asked Mary Brown to send me some information, and she wrote me such a wonderful letter, and then she was nice enough to be here today. And Charles has a video that he'd like to show you of the Jarrell plantation near where Jenny was raised. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Mary Brown to read the letter that she wrote to me. Thank you very much.
Can you sit right there?
Want me to sit in?
Yeah, why don't you sit down? Okay. She didn't have trouble sitting down.
Write this for it to be read, other than when she asked me if I could give her any information about Grandma Middlebrooks. I explained to her, and I wrote it in a letter and explained what I knew, and she asked me to read what I wrote to her, so I read it just as it is. She has omitted the date, but it was long in April, I think, wasn't it? And it begins, Dear Eagle, and I might say this on the date. I had an ugly mark up there where I'd marked through, because when I dated it was 1994, and I put it 1894 because I'd written the 1800s so much. And I said, Dear Eva, you cannot know how pleased I am that you plan to honor my paternal grandmother, Mary Jane Jarrell Middlebrooks, known as Jenny. Can you hear me over there, Ollie? Mary Jane, to honor her at the reunion in August. She was born July the 9th, 1846, and died on October the 5th, 1908. And then parenthetically, that was after I was born on June the 25th, 1908. Her parents were staunch members and leaders in the Primitive Baptist Church and observed near Round Oak, Georgia, in which the ceremony of humility was observed annually by washing one another's feet. And I might say this parenthetically, her brother lived in Clayton, and Papa would take him, Joseph Anderson Middlebrooks was my father, and he would take Uncle Randy to that observance, the second Sunday in May every year. He was Primitive Baptist also. In pre-Civil War days, when Jenny grew up, she was probably happy and carefree. She was an accomplished horsewoman. Her father traveled to Macon, and I might say they lived I'd say maybe 20 miles from Macon, about like that. And he traveled to Macon to have a side saddle made for her. This side saddle had white leather seat in it, and it was quilted, a very fine saddle. And of course, side saddles were those things that were being used at that time, that women did. It was one of the very few personal items that she brought to Texas with her. Of course, I never knew her, but history tells us of the times in which she lived. The Civil War ended her carefree spirit, however, as there was widespread devastation, casualties by the thousands, excessive taxes with no funds to pay, even food became scarce, and the whole country was overrun by carpetbaggers. Their livestock was either killed or taken away. After some restoration and livestock either, wait a minute, I lost my place, was either killed or taken away. And then after that came the westward movement with poor roads, sometimes trails, rivers to cross on ferries or fords, resettlement in strange places, away from family and friends. I salute her and others as brave and courageous survivors. My introduction to Jenny at a very early age, possibly 5 or 6, I observed Papa Joseph Anderson Middlebrooks, known as Joe, looking at a tintype picture of a woman and a teenage girl in an oval-shaped walnut frame hanging on the wall. And I brought that picture with me, so I'm going to show it to you as we go along. This letter's a little long, as I said, it didn't. This is Jenny as a teenage girl and her mother, who was Bessie Middlebrooks and married John Jarrell. And this is the one that we are honoring today when she was a girl. Thank you. My father was looking at this picture that was hanging on the wall in this walnut frame. I asked him who they were, and with love, admiration, and pride, he pointed to the girl and replied, "That is my mother." That picture came to Papa by way of Uncle Randy, John Randolph Jarrell, Jenny's brother, who came to Texas around 1857, bringing pictures of his family, as he might never see them again. After his wife, Aunt Emily, died, he married her niece, Molly Williamson. Aunt Molly gave that picture and 6 others to Papa after Uncle Randy died in 1913. Eva, I could give you Jenny's genealogy on her Middlebrooks side, back to Joseph Middlebrooks, born in England in 1610 and arrived in America in 1635, only 15 years after the Pilgrims. But I think 2 generations will suffice. So I started with William Sims Middlebrooks, who was born in 1793, married Nancy Williamson. They had 8 children, including Anderson Joseph Middlebrooks. Anderson Joseph Middlebrooks married Emily Childs. They had 4 children, including John Floyd Middlebrooks. John Floyd Middlebrooks married Mary Jenny Jarrell in 1866. They had 8 children. John Floyd's father and Jenny's mother were brother and sister. And then to turn to the Jarrell side of Grandma Middlebrooks. Blake and Zilpha Jarrell settled in Jones County, Georgia, years before the Civil War. Their home was a 2-story frame house with a fireplace on either end. The brick for the fireplaces, were made by their slaves. The kitchen was separate from the house, with another fireplace for cooking. All that exists now are 3 piles of bricks. Blake was a prosperous planter with several hundred acres of land and slaves and family to cultivate it. The family worked along with the slaves. They had 8 children, including John Jarrell. 2 other sons were killed in the war and are buried in the Jarrell Cemetery that Blake laid off on his land. Roads have changed, and the home site and cemetery are all now in a forest preserve. Blake and Zilpha, John and Bessie, and Nancy are interred there. Blake's slaves are interred on land adjacent and part of the cemetery, just as he planned it. They are not mixed up with the whites, but they are down on one side. A daughter of Blake and Zilpha married Uncle Daniel Leslie, who came to Texas after his wife died, and he lived near Clayton. John Jarrell, and this is Jenny's father. John Jarrell married Elizabeth, called Bessie Middlebrooks. They had 7 children. They settled some 10 miles away from Blake and Zilpha near Round Oak, Georgia, where 5 of their 7 children lived to adulthood: Joe, Levi, Randy, Elizabeth, and Jenny. Joe and Levi became Methodist ministers. Randy was a devout Primitive Baptist, as was his father. John Jarrell believed in education and sent Joe and Levi to college in Atlanta, where Jenny would have gone but for the war. He supported the community school and often paid the teacher himself. A set of encyclopedias of 1836, his desk, church records, and personal accounts are still at the Jarrell plantation. John built a 1.5-story house, which is still in good state of repair. He put together a self-contained farm, boasting a horse-powered gin and press, grist mill, syrup mill, blacksmith shop, and tools, where he and Daniel Leslie, his brother-in-law, built a wagon complete. And if you had visited the Jarrell plantation, Willie would have shown you some of the tools that they actually used in making that wagon. John made the wood part of it, and Daniel Leslie made the iron. They couldn't leave home. His children were hard. John Jarrell was a hard worker and made his children work. They couldn't leave home, the boys couldn't, until they were 21. Some even called him a slave driver. Much damage was done to his farm during and after the war, as his place was in the path of one general's scorched earth policy. In fact, I think that's where that phrase was born. Bessie Middlebrooks Jarrell was a good wife and mother. She trained her children in the social graces of the time, as evidenced by Jenny always referring to her husband, cousin, as Mr. Mid, never calling him by his given name, although they were both reared between Round Oak and Juliet, Georgia, not more than 6 or 8 miles apart. Now, I was guessing that. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I know it's not very far. Bessie died of typhoid, as did a daughter, in 1864. And within 3 months, John Jarrell married Mrs. Nancy James, a war widow with 2 small children. She and John then had 8 children. Their oldest was Richard, called Dick, and Richard and Papa were born the same year, 1867. Dick acquired the farm that John and Bessie owned after John's death. Dick was an enterprising young man with education above the average. I don't know where he went to school, but I assume that they sent him also to Atlanta to a school. I think it was called an institute at that time, and later became a part of Emory University. He added more land and made remarkable improvements, even adding a steam boiler to power the farm machinery. Built a big barn, shelters for all of the equipment, the farming equipment, installed a pump in order to have running water, and built an imposing 2-story house. Dick married Mamie Van Zant, and they had 9 children and reared them on the farm that is now known as the Jarrell Plantation. 7 acres of which their children donated for historical preservation. Another son of John and Nancy was Chapman Jarrell, who came to Clayton, Texas as a young man. He married Jessie Ash, and they reared 3 girls in Clayton: Bessie, Annie Jane, and Evelyn. Bessie is still living. She lives in Houston. Jenny's brother, John Randolph, known as Randy, had settled near Clayton. He married Emily Williamson, daughter of former neighbors in Georgia. In Texas, the war with its destruction had hardly affected the economy, and Randy prospered. He owned a great deal of land and built a big house with 3 double chimneys, had 6 fireplaces. Can you imagine cutting wood for that many? If you've ever cut wood, it's a job. He persuaded Jenny and family to relocate in Texas, which they did around 1874. Papa, their firstborn, whom Jenny lovingly called Josie, was 7 years old when Jenny and John Floyd and children joined the westward movement. On the way to Texas, I have to lick my fingers. Josie tasted sugar for the first time. They had had honey and syrup, but no sugar. The family lived on Randy's farm several years. About this time, the U.S. government built some forts along the western frontier, including Fort Richardson. John Floyd obtained employment at the fort, and once again, the Middlebrooks family joined the westward movement. They lived at the fort compound, although the Indians had been pushed farther west. Legend has it that John Floyd carried the mail between Fort Richardson, or Jacksboro, and Palo Pinto, Texas. Now, some say that was Weatherford. I'm inclined to believe that it was Palo Pinto. After some years, John Floyd and Jenny bought land outside but near Jacksboro and built a substantial dwelling house underpinned with rock that he quarried. Now, Tom Middlebrooks showed me where that house was, and there were some rocks there that had quarried marks on it, and I took that piece of rock home with me, and I have it built in what I call my family tree on my carport. In the letter, oh, I lost my place again. Jenny wrote a letter to her half-brother's wife, Aunt Mamie, that she was so blessed to have a good well of water in her backyard. I think Papa told me that that well was nearly 90 feet deep. Is that right, Lee? Or do you know?
John Floyd's place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a real deep well.
Well,
Because,
I think he told me it was almost 90 feet. He had to draw the water, so I'm sure it seemed like it was 90 feet, but it was not.
It's too deep for Dad to draw water out of it, because he's a baby in the family. His brother bribed him into drawing a bucket, the old man was watching, and then on he had to draw water.
On school days, she'd take the youngest children on the side saddle with her to go to school. Now, I think I've skipped some. In the letter, she also said that she taught school and helped Mr. Mid pay for their land. On school days, she'd take the youngest children on the side saddle with her to go to school. Jenny wanted her oldest granddaughter, my sister Bessie, to have that side saddle. It is now on the plantation from whence it came. Evidently, Jenny was a person of strong character, gentle and kind in nature. She loved her family dearly, as she named 3 of her sons, Joe, Randy, and Lee, for her brothers and a daughter, the only one who lived to adulthood, Bessie, for her mother. All pioneers, and especially women, lived hard lives, and Jenny was no exception. She did the family laundry by drawing the water from the well, heating it in an iron pot, rubbing the clothes on a rub board, and with a sad iron, she ironed them. She also cooked meals on a wood-burning stove for her husband, sons, daughter, and several foxhounds. Now, they have said that Grandpa Middlebrooks was a hunter and always kept 6 or 8 hounds. Is that right, Lee? Have you heard?
He had 20 at one time, I believe so.
Had 20? Well, the story gets
He
bigger.
hunted wolves on horseback, is the way I hear the story.
What?
That he hunted wolves on horseback.
Oh, hunted woods, not fox.
Well, not fox. Well, he might
Well,
have
if they had
hunted
hounds,
fox
to
too,
me,
but
it'd be for fox,
wolves were
but
his main attraction.
They had a Wolf Hunters Association in the county. Old man Cherry Home, Old man Barry, and Grandpa Middlebrooks had a contest every year to see which one could catch a wolf first. And they turned the wolves loose at different times, whoever caught them in less than a number of hours. Most of the time it took 24 to 30 hours to run a wolf down. And there were, all 3 of those people had more than 20 hounds at one time, for a long time. Grandpa Middlebrooks hunted deer, and he hemmed the deer up, and when the hound bait him, he'd shoot the deer with this old 10-gauge shotgun. Wayne has here to show everybody directly, I think, if you want to see it.
yeah, Eva, he's the one that you should have contacted to get this information.
Well, maybe we could do Mr. Mid next year, okay?
Well, that'd be fine. After enduring all the unending hardships, she became a true Texan, boasting in a letter to Aunt Mamie that she never once regretted coming west, as Texas is far superior to Georgia. Doesn't that sound just like a Texan? I hope this gives you something to share with Jenny's descendants in honoring her. I wish I could hear your presentation. Papa and Mama honored her and my other grandmother by naming me for them, both of whom were good Christian women. Remember me to all of the cousins. Much love to all of them. Mary Carolyn Middlebrooks Brown, Route 1, Brownwood Acres, Carthage, Texas.
Okay, thank you so much. That was wonderful and very good. The letter is available for anyone who would like to have a copy. I can send you the typed copy.
Have you got some of them?
I only have this one today, but just let me know. Write your address down and let me know, and I'll send you one. As well as the... Okay. What I'm going to do at this point is introduce Charles, who has a video of the Jarrell plantation. He was kind enough to bring it. And after, or would you like to show the gun now, Dwayne, so the guys can be looking at it? Or I think a lot of the men here have a very big interest in that rifle. Okay. And then while we're waiting then for that, we'll just go ahead and put our names on the ribbon. I have a stapler here, and y'all can all
How many
staple it
have
on.
visited the Jarrell plantation in Georgia? Raise your hands. Well, there's a good one
Now,
now.
we're getting together a group next year, people of our age.
Before I get started, I'd like to say I've got all three of my children here together for the first time. My daughter is her first visit here, except when she was 2 years old. And so glad to have her back in the fold.
Yay.
And I've got some of my grandkids here, and that's a wonderful experience. But on the old guns, I inherited my grandfather's shotgun, Thomas Lee, and my dad gave it to me when he passed on. And I brought this gun about 5 years ago and showed the family, and it created some interest. It's an L.C. Smith 16 gauge double barrel. After that talk, Ad came up to me and he said, Dwayne, he said, your grandfather, he said, I don't know if you know it or not, but your grandfather, Thomas Lee, inherited John Floyd's 10 gauge shotgun. And I said, I didn't know it. And he said, well, your grandfather gave the gun to me, this is how he told it, to save keep for future generations of direct descendant of Thomas Lee's that would want the gun. I was to give it to him. And I think you would enjoy having the gun, and I'll bring it to you next year. So next year rolled around. Well, here At was with the old 10 gauge shotgun. I imagine that he had it in his possession some 40 years. I would think it was probably the hardest thing he ever did to turn loose of that old gun, but he gave it to me, and I'll never forget him for it. And I decided to bring it this year for the old timers who may have seen it in the past that would enjoy it. And this is John Floyd's old 10 gauge double barrel. I don't know when he acquired the gun, but as was said earlier, he worked for the fort and he drove a freight wagon. And there were still Indians in the area occasionally. And I'm sure there was some bad hombres out there as well. And I can just imagine this old gun riding up in the freight wagon with him for protection. It was probably used for home protection when he lived north of Jacksboro. It probably also supplied a lot of meat for the table. And in the few years I've had this gun, I found out it's quite magical. If you love it and you rub it, it transposes you back to John Floyd's day. And you can imagine his sons, you can imagine John Floyd, the hardships they suffered, the good times they had during their wolf hunts. And it puts you back in that era. And I love the old gun. I don't feel like I'm the owner of this gun. I feel like I'm just the keeper of it for the Middlebrooks family. And I'm sure my sons will pass it down to their sons. And as long as there's a reunion and family that wants to see it, it'll be here to be shown. Thank y'all very much.
If y'all remember 2 or 3 years ago, going to get a turkey down on the river, the old man gave him one shell and told him if he come back without a turkey, whip it. This is the gun he carried to the river. He got his turkey, and on the way home, the panther followed him all the way home, going around and around him. He didn't have a shell left, so he took the gun with the barrel over his shoulder, and he said, if that panther gets this turkey, he's going to have to fight for it. He made it home.
Guns, I understand, meant quite a bit to people in that era because you couldn't eat without a gun. The meat that you got was gathered through the use of a gun, so it's a symbol of life in many ways. And that's something that I didn't really understand until I spoke to my uncle about it, because he's, very interested in guns. My father was very interested in guns. He loved guns, he said. That's something that many older men in my family say. They love guns. And I didn't really understand the concept until I spoke to my uncle the other day. Now, we're going to watch the video.
Excuse me, I had one other
Yes,
thing
sir.
to say I wanted to put in the talk. Anything that we have that belonged to John Floyd or his wife or the families before, such as that picture, I think it would be wonderful if we dug them out and brought them to family reunion occasionally and talked about it. And it puts us in more of that John Floyd and our ancestors, it makes it all more real to see some of, and have a little show and tell. I think it would bring a lot of enjoyment to the reunion.
We certainly are trying to do that, and I think that's an important part of to acknowledge the commandment, honor thy father and thy mother, and that's what we're trying to do here today, is honor the people that gave us life. And any pictures and any memorabilia and anything that you have to share with the family, please bring it and let us see it. Okay. So that's part of what we're...
And I intend to start getting that when I can start getting that. The only problem with that is you have to pay $4 per car to get into the park. If you're over 65 years of age, you don't have to pay anything. So there's half one hand, half the other type of thing. But a lot of people don't like to pay the $4 to get in. But it will be a good place. The kids will have a place to play. There's restrooms available, and it will be cool. So we may have to just kind of juggle and be a little bit late for the next couple of years until that gets built, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I think this is a great place. It's about the right size. And I don't mind
Sure
it
is,
starting at 12 if nobody else minds.
No, and it doesn't bother me either. The only thing is that next time we'll have to kind of make things a little faster so that those of you who have to get on the road will be through by like 3 or 3:30 so you can get on the road. Don't really have anything. Last year we had about 25 people that went to Deer Park for our evening meal of hot dogs. We had rain, if you can believe it or not, in August, and that's what kept the crowd kind of down last year because it was muddy to get over there. Sunday we came to the Jacksboro Elementary School cafeteria. That was a nice place, except you had to sit on the little bitty chairs and it was kind of uncomfortable. We had about 47 people there. Technically we had the same amount of people this year. We had about 25 people at the picnic last night, and we have between 47 and 50 people here today.
Let's give them a hand.
We've all decided we want to keep with the Saturdays. You're welcome. We want to keep with the Saturdays. I will make sure that we always have our little controversy about the first Sunday in the minutes, okay? So we need to carry that forward. That's not going to come up for another 9 years, so don't worry about it. We do have monies left over. We had a good collection again today. Thank you very much. And even I'll be sending you out some sort of announcement. If there's anything you would really like to do, or if you have something that you would like to present, let us know. We're always interested in letting anybody take share and do their part. That's it.
Jane is yet. Bowl is still out here for the next family reunion. Donations.
Let's hold right down and you do some.
Bye.
Now, both of these, Dwayne, were John Floyd?
No, this 16 gauge was Thomas Lee's, which was my grandfather, John Floyd's son. And then the 10 gauge here is John Floyd's. Now this gun was manufactured, just guessing, I would say in about 1880s. This was manufactured around 1900, 1910.
So he bought that after he got to Texas then,
My
John Floyd.
my father told me that his father bought the L.C. Smith the year he was born, 1906. Now when John Floyd got the 10 gauge, I don't know, but I believe it would date somewhere between 1870 and 1880. So he probably bought it on his way here or after he got here to Texas. But this is a heavy enough gauge.
That was a lot different than what he fought with in the war between the states, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. But this is definitely old enough to have ridden in the old wagon with him on the way over to Weatherford and back. You know, there were still some Indian problems going on in Jacksboro in the area when he first settled here.
I knew some of these were here, but I couldn't remember the names of them, which one was which.
We'll put them at their resting place, and hopefully they're aware of it.
Now tell us about the wreath, if you would.
The wreath is a grapevine wreath with ivy leaves and a garland around it. White wild roses, pink roses for Mary Jane Jenny, and we have all of the names of the relatives that were at the reunion in 1994 on Sunday on the little horses on the ribbon. And this is in honor of our great-grandfather and great-grandmother, in my case, and in many cases the great-great-grandmother and great-grandfather, and some of the young ones even the great-great-great. And we just wanted to put this here to let them know. The ivy is symbolic of a sharp wit, and we figured that Mary Jane probably did have one. She was well educated and a noble woman of some means before she came to Texas. And from her descendants, it's apparent that education was important, and we felt like the ivy would be significant for her. So that's what we did.
So Mary Jane Jarrell here on the left, and John Floyd, her husband, on the right.
Back in those days.
I wrote Mary and I said, I have an ancestor who's a pioneer and I want to know more about her. That's the wrong kid.
Private, First Brigade. I always thought it was the 2nd Brigade. This says 1st.
You know, I heard a great story about John Floyd. He was young and all of his brothers went off to join the army when the war was declared.
It always amazes me
And he went and found a regiment. And it wasn't a couple of days later that he found out that he joined the wrong side.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
So he leaped over a wagon tongue and got out of there quick when he found out.
Growing up, I never thought Columbus's daddy looked alike.
We're here at Tom and Marie's gravestone, and we've got the 3 of the daughters, and they're upset with me because I didn't interview them at the at the reunion. But we want to interview y'all now. I want you to tell me your name and tell me about your children.
My name is Catherine Marie, and I have no children, so I can't tell you about my children, so I'll go to Daphne.
Daphne Eileen, and I have 2 children, Joseph Thomas and Matthew Anthony.
And my name is Eva Louise Middlebrooks Putman, and my husband's name is David. My daughter's name is Evan Parker Putman. And I wanted to just mention one thing. The koinonia on the stone of my parents stands for togetherness in marriage. And it was inside my mother's ring as well that my dad gave her. Koinonia is a Greek word, meaning oneness.
The man was a romantic.
He was a romantic. And that's all, folks.
That's all, folks. Bye.
That list,
Second board.
Is that from the 7th generation?
That's the one that says Georgia. It's on the thing that is.
And Aunt Nettie.